Okay, happy Friday. Let's see. Okay, I went to the school and got our earthquake terror book. Um, and we have 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 6 chapters left. Now, I don't know how long a chapter is going to take me, so I'm going to either read 1 chapter or 2 chapters. I'm trying for 2 chapters. I'm hoping to be able to read 2 chapters. Okay, so we're on chapter 11, and we will start. Actually, I wanted to start a little bit into chapter 10 because that's where we left off. Okay, so remember when Jonathan was trying to get his sister's mind off of how scary their situation was, and he wanted to sing a song, so he decided to sing 99 Raggedy Anns on the Shelf. I'm going to start. Okay, so he's singing, which is a very long song, right? If you start at 99 Raggedy Anns. So I am going to go to the part, I think you'll remember this. All of a sudden they're floating on their tree and they see a fire. So I'm going to start there. Fire. Jonathan counted 5 separate bright fires. 5 fires. The dark outlines of buildings were silhouetted against the fire closest to him. Beaverville is burning. Okay, I'm trying to keep the book in. Okay. Jonathan realized there were no other lights, which meant the electricity must have gone. But there would still be people. People would be there fighting the fires. They might even be on the banks of the river, dipping buckets of water to use on the fires. We're going to call for help, Jonathan said. Maybe someone on shore will hear us. I'll count to 3 and we'll yell together. 1, 2, 3. Help! Abby's voice joined his and they screamed together over and over. Help! Help! Then they listened to see if there was any response. They heard no answering shouts. Jonathan tried to gauge how far they were from shore. He guessed it was twice the distance from home plate to the center field wall. He was a strong swimmer. He could probably make it, despite the swift current. Moose would make it for sure. Maybe he and Moose should swim to shore, and then someone in a boat could go after Abby and bring her back. Even as he made the plan, he knew he wouldn't carry it out. He couldn't leave Abby floating down the river alone. She was terrified. And without Jonathan to distract her with singing, she would probably get hysterical. What if she slipped off her tree or was knocked off? At least if they were together, Jonathan might be able to save her if she fell in. By herself, Abby would have no chance. 1, 2, 3, Jonathan counted. Help! They yelled together. Help! Help! Their shouts faded into the darkness. Could anyone on shore hear them? Was there anyone on shore? Maybe Beaverville had been evacuated. If so, where were Mom and Dad? They had been headed for the emergency room at Beaverville Hospital, but maybe the hospital wasn't functioning. Maybe the hospital was burning. For all he knew, most of Beaverville was a pile of rubble. The shoreline changed. The glow of the fires faded away like the tailgates of a passing car. Beaverville was behind them. Blackness took its place. Mommy didn't hear us, Abby said. We'll try again at the next town. I'm cold. I want my Barney sweatshirt. For an instant, Jonathan was annoyed. What did she expect him to do? Swim back to Magpie Campground? Dive into the river? Lift the giant redwood with one hand? Grab her sweatshirt off the hook and then swim back? I'm not Superman, Jonathan muttered. When we get home, Abby said, let's make popcorn. Jonathan's annoyance vanished. She's only 6. He reminded himself, she doesn't really understand what is happening to us. Popcorn sounds great, he said. Jonathan knew there was another town, Kendra. Still ahead on the bank of the Tuscan. Maybe they would float closer to shore by then. Maybe someone in Kendra would hear their cries. And maybe not. Okay, that takes us to chapter 11. Mrs. Palmer screamed. Mr. Palmer clutched the steering wheel and slammed his foot on the brake. Trees crashed around them as the car buckled like an untrained horse. They had just crossed the bridge from Magpie Island to the mainland when the earthquake hit. Without warning, the entire car rose 6 inches off the road and bounced back down again. Mr. Palmer Sorry, this is annoying. Mr. Palmer turned off the engine, but the car kept moving, swaying from side to side and rocking from back to front at the same time. The Palmers leaned forward in their seats with their hands on their heads while the earth pitched and rumbled and shook. The quake went on. "We have to go back," Mrs. Palmer said when it was finally over. "We must get the children." Mr. Palmer got out of the car and looked around. The road was buckled in several places. Trees were down everywhere. He walked behind the car to the bend in the road and looked back toward the island. His heart drummed loudly as he returned to the car. "We can't go back," he said. The bridge collapsed. Mrs. Palmer looked through the windshield at the trees blocking the road. "We can't drive to town either," she said. "We'll have to walk back to Beaverville for help. I'll wait here." She said, "You'll have to walk back." Her ankle throbbed. The movement of the earthquake had made her legs bounce, and several times the broken ankle had slammed into the car door. She hoped she would not pass out from the pain. "I don't like to leave you," Mr. Palmer said. "There's no choice." He nodded. He looked at his wife and saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. Were Jonathan and Abby hurt? How long would it take for help to get to them? "Get help for Jonathan and Abby first," Mrs. Palmer said. "I can wait. They may not be able to." He nodded. "I'll hurry," he said. It was not so easy to hurry. He couldn't just run along the road to town. He had to climb over downed trees and step around fallen branches. Half a mile from the car, power lines hung across the road. The wooden power pole tilted at a 45-degree angle while the lines drooped downward. The wires hissed, and sparks flew out. Mr. Palmer walked half a city block out of his way to get past the wires without touching them. He hoped they didn't start a forest fire. This area was heavily wooded, and there had been no rain all summer. He added the power lines to his mental list of emergencies to deal with as soon as he got to town. Or did this mean there would be no telephone service in Beaverville? Maybe all the power and telephone lines were out of service. It might not be so easy to arrange a rescue for Abby and Jonathan, and another for his wife. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and plunged on toward Beaverville. Fear surrounded him like a winter fog. His body stayed warm from the physical exertion, but inside, his heart felt chilled. 3 hours later, he saw a house set back from the road. He pounded on the door. A fat, balding man opened the door. "I need help," Mr. Palmer said. "Don't we all? My kids are alone on Magpie Island, and my wife's in the car back by the bridge with a broken ankle. I need to use your telephone." "Won't do you any good," the man said. "Phone's out. Power's out. Water mains are broken." He opened the door wider. "You're welcome to come in and wait with me and my wife. We can offer you a peanut butter sandwich, but that's all." "Thanks anyway," Mr. Palmer said. "I'll go into town." There must be some sort of emergency headquarters. The Red Cross or the National Guard or someone must be coordinating rescue efforts. "Good luck," the man said. "Thanks, I'm going to need it." As Mr. Palmer continued on the road toward Beaverville, it grew dark. Blisters bubbled on both of his heels. He hoped Jonathan had sense enough to wait in the camper. Abby would fall asleep in a place where she was accustomed to. He smelled the town before he saw it. Smoke hung in the air, making it difficult to breathe. He coughed and held his arm up to his face, trying not to inhale the smoke. As he climbed a small hill, he saw an orange glow ahead. At the crest of the hill, Mr. Palmer stopped. Fire! Flames licked skyward as he gazed down at the town. He saw 5 separate fires in different parts of Beaverville. The road down the hill into town was free of debris. Mr. Palmer ran toward the fires. At the bottom of the hill, a group of people milled in the street watching one of the fires. Mr. Palmer couldn't believe that they were just standing around watching instead of trying to put the fire out. "Get water!" he yelled as he ran toward them. "Get the fire department!" The group turned to him. "There isn't any water," a woman said. "All the main water lines broke. We hauled river water in buckets for a while, but we weren't nearly fast enough, and we gave up." It was like trying to put it out by spitting. A man in a baseball cap added, "The fire department is just as helpless as we are. The gas line broke too, and the gas is feeding the flames. Half the buildings in town are on fire," the woman said, "and the other half are knocked off their foundation." "Are there any emergency services?" Mr. Palmer asked. At the high school, someone replied, "People whose homes were destroyed are staying there." "What about medical help?" "That's at the school, too. The hospital was evacuated." Mr. Palmer asked for and received directions to the high school. As he started off, a young man touched his shoulder. "Anything I can do to help you?" the young man asked. "My wife's in our car back near the bridge to Magpie Island. I think she has a broken ankle." "My name's Kenny," the young man said. "I've got a chainsaw and a four-wheel drive vehicle. Be glad to try to get through to her if you want to go with me and help clear the road." "Yes," Mr. Palmer said. "I'd be grateful for that. But first I need to alert the authorities that my children are alone on Magpie Island." "Are you sure?" "We left them in our camper while I drove my wife to the hospital. After the earthquake hit and knocked the bridge out, we couldn't go back after them. It will take a boat or a helicopter to get them off the island. I heard on the radio a few minutes ago," Kenny said, "I heard on the radio a few minutes ago," Kenny said, "that Magpie Island is gone." "Gone? How could it be gone?" "The earthquake shifted the flow of the river and the island flooded over and disappeared." "No," Mr. Palmer said. "No, not Jonathan and Abby. Oh, please, no." "I'm sorry, sir." Kenny put his arm around Mr. Palmer's shoulder. "We can go to the school, and you can hear it for yourself if you like." "I believe you. Shall we go find your wife?" Mr. Palmer started to follow Kenny, then stopped. "No, not yet," he said. "I have to let someone know that Jonathan and Abby are missing. There must be search planes or helicopters. How else would they know the island disappeared?" "Not much chance of two kids surviving if the whole island's gone," Kenny said softly. Maybe they got off the island," Mr. Palmer said. "Maybe they found a boat or something else that floats. Jonathan's a strong swimmer, and our dog was with him. Maybe he and Moose got Abby to shore." As he spoke, he knew he was babbling. He saw the pity in Kenny's eyes and knew the young man thought grief was making him grasp at impossibilities. "Maybe I am," he thought. "Maybe there's no hope that Jonathan and Abby survived, but I can't give up without trying to find them." Wearily, he walked toward the high school. Okay, so it looks like we will be reading one chapter a week because that took us 12 minutes. So I'm going to stop the video now. Very exciting. His parents finally came back into the story, right? And we will, next Friday, we'll start on chapter 12.